Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this pale blue dot that we all live on. Hope everyone out there is feeling well. My name's Adamantium, and welcome to this edition of AAU TZM Podcasts. Just a brief note for those of you listening to this on YouTube right now, my podcasts also exist on talkshoe.com. In the description of this video, you'll find a direct link to it. There you can listen to and download the full 60-minute podcasts for free in MP3 format. I mean, I'd love to get some feedback on my podcast, any suggestions from you guys in regards to future shows. And also, I'm always looking for questions that I can answer on my Q&A shows. But anyway, as for today, I'm very pleased to have Ben McLeish on the show. So say hello, Ben.
How's it going? You can hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear, dude. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and give a brief history of how you came across and joined the Zeitgeist movement?
Sure. I'm Ben McLeish, UK chapter, I guess we call it. And I spend most of my time writing and presenting lectures on some of the various points that we talk about as a movement. There are many disparate points, so it takes quite a lot to hone in on something and kind of deliver it. I do that, and in my spare time I have a job as well. It feels that way sometimes. Like many people, I saw Zeitgeist 1 online. I was forwarded it by 3 or 4 different friends of mine who don't know each other. And it was at that point that I took it seriously. I said, oh, well, this keeps coming my way, so let's have a look. Which is important, isn't it? Because it just reminds you that repeating and getting the message out is actually quite important through different people.
Yeah.
So I saw that first one, and I sort of, I kind of came away thinking, oh, that's pretty interesting and pretty well made, and, that was it. And I sort of shelved it in my mind. And then, apropos of nothing, one day at work, someone just pressed into my hand a copy of Zeitgeist Addendum. I didn't know it would come out. It was news to me. And I never said anything about the first Zeitgeist film, so the guy clearly was on a mission to spread information. And I thought, oh, I like the first one, I'll check the second one out. And pretty much after the first 10 minutes of that film, I was completely on board with what was going on. Because once you have understood the mechanism of money, the mechanism that actually underlies everything that we do, all of our efforts, all of the things that are made available, and you realize that that is completely flawed. A nagging feeling which I, by the way, always had but never looked into. So that was that one, but I didn't do much with that film either. I thought it was great. I did some research on fractional reserve banking, and I looked into some of it and thought it was interesting. But once again, having been aware of the movement, which is plugged at the end of that film, I didn't really do anything. I visited the site once or twice, maybe, just to see if it was actually there. But it was actually in 2009 when another member of the movement, Will Dixon, who's also another presenter and our resident first-class sociologist, he sort of took me aside and said, hey, man, I hadn't spoken to him for about a year and a half, and he said, hey, man, have you heard about this Venus project, the Zeitgeist movement? I was like, yes, I have, man. He's like, yeah, well, I'm thinking about doing something about it, actually doing something. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. And so within less than a year, we were both presenting at Z-Day 2010 in London, and then we did this year as well. And it's sort of taken its own life from there. I sort of, I just sort of wandered into the movement and said, hi, guys, I'm confident speaking to people, and I think I know enough about this particular topic to talk about it or that. And from there, we've been invited to talk in places, and since then, I've sort of started, writing more and more and trying to actually proactively find places to present to different people. So, yeah, it's been a sort of incremental growth, but at every point really drawn by people engaging with me about it. And that's very important, I think, that people remember that. It's not just a bunch of people on the internet. I think, at least with me, the real message came when people spoke to me and said, how about this, making it real life. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I've found that recently when you're on the internet, when you're talking to someone, especially if it's someone who is either resistant to a certain idea or is not completely sure and doesn't really want to devote themselves or align themselves with any sort of idea, the easiest thing they can do is just not saying anything or just change the subject or something like that, and trying to talk to people about the movement on the internet kind of tends to, in my experience, half of the time it tends to sort of, meander into that sort of groove. And I ask people, I'm always looking for questions for my podcast, and they're like, all right, yeah, I'll think of something, and I hardly ever hear anything more about it from them. So
yeah, I mean, there are different levels of people, man, and it must be said that not everyone has to be in the movement to agree with this stuff. I think gradually, as we're going to gain traction, and as gradually these become very, very relevant talking points for average people, that quite a few people will come out of the woodwork and say, do you know what, I'm sort of already with this. I haven't worn it on my sleeve, but this is a value set that I understand and that I appreciate and that I'm in support of. And that's fine, man, because at that moment when they come out is when they're needed. It doesn't have to be everyone yelling it all the time. It could actually be, for some people, it will be a dormant passenger, if you like, in their life. And that's fine as well, because they're not going to be going around, damaging the efforts to spread the knowledge. They're just sort of going to quietly sit there. And I think there's quite a lot of people who are like that. Of course, we only ever get to more of those people by having people who really are pushing it and really are going to wear it and kind of live it and let it be their value set and just, and argue, not argue, but present these ideas in one form or another, whether it's on the internet or whether it's in passing conversations to a fellow traveler on an aeroplane, like I often do, or whether it, is just, just anything, any register of these values being appropriated out into the real world,
Yeah. Well, since we're on the topic of values, it brings us full circle to what this podcast is actually going to be about. Now, for this podcast, I wanted to have a discussion with you as a kind of extension of your Futurists, Technology and Culture Lag presentation concerning the current cultural climate, or the Zeitgeist, as we call it, and what comprises it. And in other words, what societal values we currently hold and how they're reflected by our dominant economic system and how they're inhibiting change.
Well, that's a wonderful question, and it's probably the central question for everything, isn't it? I was thinking about this the other day, actually, in preparation for this. There are three kinds of propaganda that I can see in a society. The first and most notorious, and obviously the most clear, is propaganda used to wage war or to have a sort of outsider view of another country or another people's or something like that. Something that's very deliberate. It's advertising, it's this kind of very loud jingoistic stuff. That's the first one. And it's very identifiable, isn't it? Because it's glad to be identified as a message.
Yes, and it's always in our faces 24/7 as well.
That's exactly right. The second one is sort of more local stuff, like the propaganda that our individual political parties will use to have a go at each other and to win elections within the country. So I'm doing this on a country level, but this is sort of going to lead into it. So there's that as well. And we're a little bit less known about that. Some people don't know that politicians are playing a dirty game. Just look at the news. We've got the news today that Rebecca Brooks just resigned from News International. And you look at all that stuff, you've got this sort of, this stories coming out about political donations and about, riding on particular, newspapers getting behind certain campaigns to basically force that propaganda in. But the third kind of propaganda, and it's one that's wholly invisible and therefore is probably the most powerful, is the general propaganda of general operation. And by that we mean things like the idea that money is okay, the idea that money is the default exchange mechanism and basis of all. That's just taken for granted. But it is propaganda. It's in fact a conforming value set, if you like. And amongst those we have many other things, like, I don't know, technology is dangerous because it'll always lead to, fascism and supremacy like in Terminator. Or the idea that you should get a job, get a job, that kind of thing, right? These are, in fact, forms of propaganda because they conform to a set of values being pushed out, whether it's by a group of people or whether it's by the general operation of society. And that's really what we're talking about here, especially when it comes to technology, when it comes to innovation, when it comes to running things, when it comes to the goals of a society. Those are goals that are pretty much deselected a priori by the foundational logic of the society itself. And that's very hard to discuss because it's quite hard to actually put that out there. You'll hear me stuttering about it like I just did. It's actually quite hard to enunciate because what you have to do is sort of talk to people beyond the pale a little bit and go, man, look, I know we've got all this stuff here, right? But just it's all made up, right? Let's start from first principles. What is actually going on that is immutable? What are the real laws of nature? What is technology's path really doing? Because it is actually independent of societal operation. And you have to start there, and that's where we're going to have to start now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier, just the notion of just get a job, it's this form of propaganda that in a way it sort of poses itself as some sort of elusive solution to any of our problems. Is one of the main examples that I can think of just right off the top of my head is the solution to any homeless person's problems is just get a job. You know, as if it's that easy.
Incredible, isn't it? Because, I mean, of course, at the same time, you're not able to get a job if you don't have a home.
Exactly.
At least most of them require you to be of no fixed abode. But what's also astonishing, and this is the bit that I wanted to kind of introduce at this point, is that regardless or not of whether a temporary income or indeed any income would somehow solve the problems for you, the big trend, of course, is that jobs are disappearing. Jobs are going away because of technological automation. We are replacing, at the moment, we're in a concerted effort to replace cash desks with automatic cash desks. Every single Sainsbury's that I've been to in the last 8 months has at least 6 of these. That's 6 entire people. And now what they've usually done is added them on the end of the existing cash desks. Yeah. But there was one in North London in Islington. In fact, I'll tell you where it is. It's on Junction Road, where they've actually removed most of the cash desks and have now put in mostly automated ones.
Really?
So, yeah, absolutely. So you can go in and grab something and leave the store without having interface with the person. And instead of getting locked up, what you've actually done is to deal with a machine. And so, and why not? This is the thing, is that's commonly seen as bad, but it's seen as bad when you have to rely on a job for income. It's not bad at all if we rely on the machines to produce the resources instead of needing an income to buy the things that the resources produced, you see. Yeah. So gradually it's becoming a more and more invalid basis for economics is employment. And depending on whose statistics you believe, what do we have? The latest out of America was that employment is something like, it's way over 9%, basically. And that's of course a huge amount if you believe the official statistics. Now, there's another side to that, which is that in America you don't count people who are underemployed, so they could have 2 hours a week employment and they're not unemployed. And so they fall off the sort of poverty rate completely. Or if you look at things like shadow stats or any of those kinds of things, you realize that the 99 weekers, the people who've been employed for more than 99 weeks, stop getting benefits and so stop getting counted as being unemployed, when, of course, they are the most unemployed. And so those statistics are probably way over 20%. Way over 20%. I think it's at least a fifth for most countries. And so, of course, you're seeing this happen. Yet, of course, we are still, a functional society in the sense that, you can now get through to an answering service where you used to just be held on, an ever ringing phone line, because we have actually put in place extremely subtle